Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Huong Luu from Cash Properties. So I have with me two wonderful people who I'm super excited to interview today. So Mina and Tina. Okay. And I love how that rhymes. It's like when I first saw that, I'm like, oh, they rhyme. Oh, that's so super awesome. So yeah, that doesn't take much to make me happy.
Love
So
it. Perfect.
that's fantastic. In the brief introduction that you both gave, you guys gave so many tidbits and ahas that I'm just gonna like start peeling back the layers, right? So
Absolutely.
so that's perfect. So so our aim today is to talk about Canadians investing in the US, right? Why the US, and then specifically maybe why Cleveland. Okay.
Mm,
And so, so to so for somebody like me, I haven't even started in the US. Like everything's in Canada, right? And every time I look at investing in the US, something comes up and it's like, no, you know what? There's this hiccup there. There's this challenge, and I'm not prepared to deal with that challenge. So I'm just going to stick to Canada,
mhm.
right? So I'm hoping that part of today's conversation will help me and other fellow investors get over that little hump of whatever some of these challenges might be with being in the US. So, um, so
So yeah, my name's Tina, and I live in Ontario, so in a city named Bradford, which is just north of Toronto, south of Barrie. And I'm a licensed realtor now, and I've been investing. My husband and I've been investing, I guess, for about 10 years, since 2013, more actively. But his background is in building and construction and contractors, so it's always been in our DNA, I think. But my background's totally different. I'm actually more of a health and wellness background. I was a dietitian and worked in managed services, corporate responsibility, and then was teaching. So, but always loved renovating, always loved real estate. And so as we got involved in it, in the last, I guess, 3 years, we really shifted to be working in it more full time. So TJ still has some of his own businesses, my husband, but it's been my full time gig for the last several years. And it's provided a bit more balance because we have two boys. I know Huang, yours is 10, so I've got a 9 and a 6 year old. So they're probably, they can tell you what they think about being dragged around renovation sites. At first they loved it, but I would say now they prefer not to go. Um, but yeah, so together with Teach, I think my husband, we've renovated about 25 properties or so in the last 5 years. So really hands-on, which has been great, but also I would say not the most sustainable, scalable model. And as I said, for my kids, I think they learned a lot, but they don't always want to be as involved now, because a lot of the properties that we were working on were a few hours from home. So our investing's been kind of in southeastern Ontario, like London area, Niagara, Waterloo, also in Simcoe region. And our kind of main focus has been the whole buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat kind of strategy, as well as some flips. And we were able to work with some great partners on some really great flips. Our first flip was not such a success story, but we kept it. We turned it into a short-term rental, and it turned out to be one of our best properties. So there's always silver linings in the learnings. And student rentals, long-term rentals, short-term rentals. I also do some property management and short-term rental management. So that's been our focus in small kind of multifamily and some duplex conversions. So what we found though, and I would say kind of where we shifted into the US, which is what we're going to talk about today, I guess it was about last year we were wrapping up one of our duplex projects out in the London area and just thinking about what was next. And some of the projects that we had last year didn't end up going exactly the way we anticipated, as many people can attest to with the shifts that happen in the market, some of the delays that happen for us with permits. And so we made it through. But it was sort of like, I don't want to do that again. What's next? So I think it was a moment to think about pivoting. And I think there's a lot of people in our industry right now thinking about how to pivot, because what got us to this point is what's not going to get us to the next point. Right. And so that was for us. So what's next in this kind of shifting market? And so I ended up connecting in with some really great people who are investing in the US. So JK Group, and did some coaching with them. Glenn Sutherland. So if you ever heard his podcast in Canadian investing in the US, it's great. Love Glenn. Hi, Glenn. And another mastermind group I joined we were just talking about it. I was just on an event last week on a cruise, and most of their events have been in Florida. with Brady McDonald, but it was kind of opening our eyes to those different opportunities. So we had shiny object syndrome, I think, for about a year, trying to figure out where to go and trying to figure out our markets. And Mina and I will talk about it a bit more, because through just recently, Mina and I connected because we're both really focused in Ohio, and we've kind of got together a great team looking at projects. So we'll talk a bit about why we went to Ohio, why we kind of moved away from Florida at this moment. But it's been a really great journey. It's not as intimidating as you think. Mina, maybe you can attest. I think at first when you're looking at corporate structures and taxation and bank accounts, you're like, oh my gosh, like, how do I do this? And how do I make sure I don't do it where I'm, not set up for success? But I think when you find the right people, it's actually quite a bit easier, and there's some amazing opportunities that we can hopefully share. So that's a bit about me, and I'll pass the mic over to you, Mina.
I should have gone first because my experience is not as lengthy as Tina's. So
That is okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Mina's a ninja. If you ever need anyone who's like the best underwriter spreadsheet person ever, everybody needs a Mina.
So I'll start with myself. I'm Mina. I'm also in Ontario. My background actually is in electrical engineering. I did that for a little while, and then I changed careers, and right now I'm actually in tech as a full-time job. So real estate is really my side gig here. I started also 13 years ago, and I started my own. I bought a townhouse. I was my own landlord, my repairman, property manager, everything, and I hated it. Hated it for 5 years. I hated it. Sold everything. Sold my one property and said never again. And I kind of sat on the sideline for 4 or 5 years, and the bugs started to come back, and that I need to get back into real estate. I think I'm just drawn to it. And I didn't know I didn't know about the communities that were out there at the time. And then I started to learn about multifamily. I discovered some of the wonderful communities that are out there, started networking with people, and it opened up my eyes to a lot of opportunities, things I would never consider, how to scale, how to run the numbers. I didn't know the concepts of cap rates and NOIs when I did this at first. So, I felt more confident going into this, knowing that I have the right support and network to help me along this journey. I'm currently an active and a passive investor in a few properties across Canada and the US, mainly in Alberta, New Brunswick, and Florida. So across all three, I'm in about a total about 63 or so doors where I'm an investor. And it's been quite a journey. I've learned a lot, and I think part of being self-aware is that I haven't learned enough. I always want to learn more. It's when I started to talk to people, and there are people who resonate more with my personality, and I can't wait till I have a strong network of people that I can just work with every day of my life, and just enjoy every moment of it. And that's how I got to meet Tina and a few of our other partners who we're working with in Ohio as well.
So Mina, I don't know if you know this, but I'm also an engineer, and I also have my project management background as well. So me and you have quite a lot in common. Yeah. And Tina, you're right. Like, for engineers, we have that analytical mindset. Like, we can underwrite in our sleep, right?
Yeah.
And
so like, I love numbers, and I come from a science and research background as well. And I was like, I consider myself pretty great, but I tell you, if there's broken links in a spreadsheet, like, I'll give it to Mina.
Right.
Yeah, and he's so fast. It's great. Yeah, so it's great though that we can quickly go back and forth, because sometimes some people are numbers people and some people aren't. You just better make sure you got at least 1 or 2 on your team, right? So
right. That's right. Okay. Oh, and before I forget, I do have to put a disclaimer out there for everybody who's watching. The ideas and suggestions that are presented today, they're my ideas, Tina's and Mina's idea. Before you go and implement anything, please go and talk to a lawyer, financial advisor, another real estate investor. Make sure it's the right strategy or idea for you. And we are not soliciting investors or making any recommendations. This is for educational purposes only. Okay, with that said, Okay, why should somebody invest in the US? Now, I'm going to quantify this by saying, assume that you're not talking to somebody who's new in real estate. Okay.
Mm.
So they already have a little bit of experience in investing in Canada. Why the US? Why now?
Mina, you want to start this time?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack there, and I really think it depends on someone's comfort level. And some people don't want to leave that comfort zone. I have a personal friend of mine, and he's been in real estate for decades, and his dad has owned real estate, and he never wants to buy anything outside of Ottawa, where I am today. So not only does he not want to invest in the US, he doesn't even want to invest outside his own city, because he's comfortable in that. He knows that domain. But that doesn't mean that investing in Canada doesn't come with its own challenges. So it really comes down to what sort of challenges are you willing to tackle? Because at the end of the day, there are opportunities everywhere. So it's not to say that Canada doesn't have opportunities, but the opportunities available to us in the United States are more available to us than they are in Canada. Having to jump through some of the red tapes in Canada, in my opinion, I think that's not worth the cost for Canadian real estate. And that's just an opinion. No one messaged me saying there are plenty of opportunities in Canada, but the United States is open for business. There are always people who are available to give you lending products that we don't even have in Canada. So I think that's just one of the reasons that one should explore investing in the United States.
I love that. Yeah. And I think honestly, it really depends on what your end goal is. Like we're all like ultimately real estate's just a vehicle for us to get to, what our purpose is and our why and kind of what we want to do and how, generational wealth or whatever it might be. So I think it doesn't make sense for everybody to invest in the US. A lot of people I know who are investing in the US have ultimate end goals of spending more time in the US or getting their E2 visa or, building a business in the US. So, for other people, they're like, I don't even want to go there. Like, so it doesn't maybe make sense to necessarily invest there. And I agree, there's still lots of opportunities in Ontario. I'd say Mina is bang on, like there's a lot, it's open for business. It's a capitalistic economy. So the financing products, like you think as a foreign investor that you're going to be limited. There's more options as a foreign investor for financing than I found there are for me here in Canada. If you can show where your down payment is coming from and that there's no laundering here and your rent's going to cover your mortgage, then you're going to get a mortgage. Like it's very much an asset-based, there's lots of asset-based lending products. And creative financing is commonplace down there. Like up here, if you're talking to people about agreement for sales, agreement versus an agreement for purchase and sale, or if you want to do a VTB, like it's a lot of times like sellers are like, what is that? Like, oh, I don't know what that is. I'm not comfortable with that, right? In the US, it's so common. I mean, you have subject to seller financing. So you can buy a property and like have title, have ownership, have control, but take over the seller's mortgage and make the payments. That is not an option in Canada. So it's a whole other world of opportunities for financing and creative financing that I think are amazing. The other piece for us, and especially in Ohio, is like just the price of entry. My husband and I first got so excited. We had like all these properties under contract in Toledo, Ohio, because we're like, oh my God, like $30,000, So we had a whole portfolio. You do your due diligence. And I was like, oh, I'm not a slumlord. Like this is not me. But you can literally buy a property for cash, a good performing property for less than a down payment in Ontario. So your opportunities to pivot, to be more creative, to just get something under contract and renovate it and finance it, it's so much easier there than getting caught up in trying to finance a large purchase up here and then refinance it and find more partners. So I think that's was a huge opportunity to just have so many more options available to you. Just that kind of price of entry, really, in terms of property.
So if somebody wanted to find out the lending products in the US that would be available to them, where would be a good place to start?
Honestly, go for it.
No, you go, Mina. Yeah, you go.
I would think that a mortgage broker is the best option, just because they have various products that they can They go shop around on your behalf, essentially. Now, someone could go directly to a bank and deal with them directly, but it's limited in terms of, some banks don't deal with real estate investors. Some only deal with, a minimum dollar spend. So while it is the case that also brokers will have certain criterias in who they're dealing with in terms of the investment vehicle, there's just so many out there. So it wouldn't take long to reach out to someone in my real estate community, ask them, which brokers are they dealing with down there, and find someone that has the exact needs that I have in terms of what I want to invest in the United States.
Okay, so it would be a broker from the US, not a Canadian broker is what you're getting at.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
in Canada, there is a difference between one broker from another broker, just like a real estate agent from another real estate agent. Is that the same thing in the US?
If there's a difference between brokers?
Yeah.
Yes. I would say, like Mina said, is reach out to people who are investing in the US and find out who they're working with, because then you don't have to vet all that for you. So there's certain brokers I got introduced to through my network, through Mina, also through met you, so that they work, and those brokers work with a lot of Canadians. Like, you want to work with a broker who works with foreign nationals and Canadians, because different process, right? But when you do, that's like their bread and butter. Like, I mean, that's a lot of their business, and they'll tell you right away. For me too, it was interesting because we were looking at, you can't mortgage a $40,000 property.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there are opportunities if you confront the cash and get a small portfolio to then go back and blanket it, right?
Yeah.
But they usually want like a minimum value, even in a blanketed mortgage. So you need to think about those strategies right before you go out and start,
So I'm just going to highlight a point. So as a Canadian investing in the US, we're considered a foreigner. Okay, so if you're watching this and going, what the hell are we talking about? It's because we're
foreign national, they call us. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. The first time I realized it was a couple of years ago, and I'm like, oh, I'm not an American, so of course I would be a foreigner, because I was talking to Lendai as one of the lending partners, and they're like, oh, you're a foreigner. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm a foreigner? Like, because I'm Chinese? And like, no, it's because you're Canadian. I was like, what? And so that was like a haha, okay. Okay, now you also mentioned subject to. So that is a term that's not used in Canada. Is that the same thing as an assumable mortgage?
No, it's a bit different because, well, if I'm thinking about up here, we have agreement to purchase, or if you assume someone's mortgage, they usually stay on title, right? It's like pending a future event. Okay, no, they're not on title. So I guess then, but you still have to qualify for the mortgage, do you not?
You still need to qualify with the lender, but the current holder can stay on as a guarantor.
Yeah.
If needed to.
I guess it would be the closest thing, but you still need to have some kind of qualification, right?
Yep. So the subject to, you don't need qualification?
No. No. And it's crazy. Like, I've met, wholesalers who just tell me, like, literally they buy properties and they just keep paying the mortgage of the person that doesn't live there anymore.
Okay. So then with the subject to in the US, does title switch over?
Yes. So you would have to, So
okay.
Yeah. And I'm not an expert in that. There'd be other people. So I would say for anyone out there, as that disclaimer, I have not done a subject to. I'm not sure about you, Mina.
No, I have not.
But I know a lot of other investors that have, and it was like, it blew my mind that I was like, okay, so I get title and I buy your property and I can just like take over your mortgage payment, but I don't have to do any qualification with the bank. I was like, wow, that's, different than what we experience in Canada for sure. But again, I would, if that's an interesting thing to you, there's other people that are far more experienced in subject to use. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So then I will cross that question off. It's funny because I was talking to another seasoned investor, and they were trying to get me to start up a real estate business in the US and, buy multi-families and stuff. And their main pitch point to me was, Huong, if you do this, you can get some special visa, and then you can have access to all these university for your kid. And I'm like, he's only 9. Like, and I don't even know if he wants to go to university down in the US, right? But their argument was that it opens up so many more opportunities for your kids. Right. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, right. So it was a huge, like it was another opportunity that opened up to say, hey, you know what? It's not just Canadian universities or Canadian opportunities, but if you create this entity in the US, you could potentially open up more, not just real estate investment, but future opportunities for your family.
I mean, it's true. We do accept, international students in Canada. Now, what if the US doesn't have the same leeway to foreign students to come and study in their country? I don't know what what their requirements are to be an international student, but one, they probably might charge more the way Canada charges international students. And on the other side, like you're able to put your children through, American universities at local costs, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now, Tina, you mentioned about buying some properties in the US and managing them. So what suggestions do you have for somebody managing from afar?
So, I'm a control freak, and one of the reasons why I thought it would be a good idea for my husband and I to invest in the U.S. is it was going to force us to let go of the control. Um, so you actually like legally can't renovate your own property, right? So, and I was looking at and still am managing kind of the online portion. For example, if it was a short-term rental or some of it, but I would give up property management. You want someone boots on the ground there. So, and what that looks like, I'm more comfortable with it. Like I work in conjunction. I have some different relationships in different provinces where I work with. I have a different deal with the property manager. So I do the tenanting and a lot of the stuff. And then I just know that they're kind of on call when I need them. But I think when you find the right property manager, like I think you have to learn how to step back. For those of us who are really active, it's hard to let go of that control. And there are like, just like you said, there's mortgage brokers and there's mortgage brokers, there's property managers and there's property managers. And in the US, you probably heard horror stories about horrible mismanagement and poor management. So I think it's super important. And one of the first things I would say is once you pick your market, like find your teams. And like I personally, like I know like Glenn, like he doesn't even go there. He does it all remotely. Like I'm not there yet. I need to physically like meet people and look at you in the eyes and have that relationship there. But you like I think the key is to build your property management team. If you're going to be doing renovations, you need to kind of build that team, or it can be really challenging to do it from a distance, which is kind of one of the reasons why I liked Ohio, because it's like 5 hours from where I live. So there's still like a remote degree of control that you can get down there more easily than if I was investing in Florida and it's like, 27 hours that I have to drive or something to get down there. Right. So, but yeah, I think that would be one thing that like we are relinquishing on is property management. Yeah. But making sure we put the due diligence in to set up the right team.
Yeah. Yeah. I like your step process there. One is to set up the like is to find the market and set up the team first, then find the property to invest in afterwards. But the market and the team comes first before doing any analysis and all of that stuff.
Right? Yeah. I mean, in an ideal world, you may be working to set up your team and an opportunity comes and you're kind of like, kind of wing it, but I wouldn't be jumping in, having properties under contract or closed and not actually have anybody to do the work, right? Like, because then you're kind of setting yourself up for, potential challenges. So, and I think there's a lot of people out there who've done it. So like I said, I just find people who've done it before me. And what's nice, like even in Ohio and Cleveland, like there's a huge network of Canadians investing in this market. And people like, I know some investors, like there's types of people who don't share. I'm a sharer. I understand why people don't share their general contractors, because if they're really busy in all their jobs, like they don't have the bandwidth to be able to do your jobs. But in some cases, there may be an opportunity to share that. But on property management, there's no reason why people can't share property managers and recommendations. So I think there's in most markets where you can find people that are investing from afar, and you can figure out kind of where their wins have been and what they can share, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mina, you mentioned that about comfort zones. So what would you say is the biggest challenge that somebody would face in terms of getting out of that comfort zone for them?
I would put it more about mindset. I think that's the biggest challenge. I know I struggle with mindset at times, and it's not because I'm investing in the States. I think it's just sometimes we get in the way of our own success. And I think one good example of that, it's an anecdotal story, but we were at the bank a couple of years ago, and I wasn't even doing any US real estate investing at the time. And we were moving RSP and TFSA funds for my wife. And we just got to talking with the financial advisor at the bank, and I started to mention real estate, and she said, blanket statement, oh, don't invest in the US at all. You're gonna pay so much taxes, and it's harder. And this is a person whose career is to offer you, I wouldn't say, financial advice broadly like this, but her job should be to look out for the growth of your financial well-being. And to her is the challenges you have to face in the US are not worth it. I'm like, why? And that's because of mindset. Well, in that case, I might just put my money in a bank's mutual fund, and that's it. So every investment comes with its own risks, and some are willing to bear those risks and a little bit of work. Real estate is not a passive it's not a passive hobby by any means. So I honestly think mindset is just getting out of your comfort zone. If what's the difference if I'm living in Canada? Nothing says that I have to only invest in Canada. So given the technology that we have today, you can easily operate your business from anywhere in the world. So why not go in where the opportunities are? And I think people don't chase that. Markets cycle, they ebb and flow, and people get fixated. I have to stay here. I have to stay here. So we need to be mindful of the macroeconomics, and that maybe Canada's real estate market is a different cycle than the US. And actually, it's a very broad statement. I think the Canadian real estate market is very hyper local, where every market is in its own phase of the cycle. So just go talk to people, explore what others are doing, and I think that right there, and that's what I do. It brings me energy to go and learn more and explore what other opportunities are available at my disposal.
Yeah. It's funny because I have the same opinion about bank staff as well, right? Because they always try and give me opinions, right? Because they look at me and they're like, oh, okay, you're young and you've got this chunk of money in your bank account. But they don't realize, like, I wrote a book on how to pay off my mortgage in 10 years. Like,
Right.
I have, over 100 doors across Canada and $1 million in private lends. And they're trying to give me advice. And so part of, every time they give me advice, like, I have to stand there and be nice.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm cringing inside because I'm ready to just punch them. Right? But then a part of me is like, I have to be nice. Yeah. But then I have to remind myself, hey, you know what? Their risk tolerance is different from mine. Their level of understanding, their level of education around real estate is different than mine.
That's right.
So even though that advice that they're giving me doesn't resonate with me, it's truly what they believe is to be the best advice that they can give me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so then once I realized, I'm like, oh, okay, calm down. You can still be nice to them. You don't have to take what they say.
Yeah. But that's the thing. People take that advice at face value and say, oh, well, my financial advisor at the bank said I shouldn't because taxation and this and that, foreigner, and like, okay, so I won't do it. And the door's closed. And that right there could open, had you gone against the advice, it can open up so many opportunities for you. So I highly recommend just changing that mindset to see what is out there, because I wish I could tell you the opportunities that aren't even in front of me, and I know they exist and I don't know what they are. And you can only see them by talking to people and doing what others are doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about that earlier. I know it's like, I mean, through real estate, I truly feel like I'm in my 40s and I'm like, oh my gosh, I finally found my tribe, I've met so many incredible humans, doing way more amazing things than myself, but I would much rather be hanging around those people because they kind of push me and inspire me. They make me think differently. And I would, there's just so many different opportunities and things that you can do that you don't even know or exist or are possible. And so for me, like the next step after joining lots of different groups and coaching was getting involved with some of these different individuals and programs and masterminds that were operating in the US. It was just like a whole nother aha moment of, oh my gosh, like this is amazing. Like this could be maybe more aligned with, what we're trying to achieve. And so in a way that we could potentially scale it a bit differently. Because I think one of the things that happens, and I know we shouldn't even get it here, but I get scarcity mindset. in Ontario, right? You're like trying to find a really great multifamily, some vacant possession or good market rents. Like, you're like, can't find it. There's none out. It all went off market. And it happens. And it's, I think it's even more challenging right now. And as soon as I was sort of, focusing a lot of our attention in the US, like even just driving around, you cannot have scarcity mindset. I mean, there just the sheer population, like alone, there's just so much more housing and opportunities, and the whole off market um, landscape is like huge. The whole direct to buyer, direct to seller is, so much like so many more people are much more comfortable with it. Um, there's just like everywhere you look, you're like, that would be an amazing flip, or that would be an amazing burr, right? Versus like, I feel like in Ontario, like I had to work hard to find those deals. Like and they exist. Like, don't get me wrong. And I always try to myself, if I ever missed out on one, I'm like, no, don't have that mindset. Like another one's around the corner. So it is. I just feel like I can't even I don't find myself in that mindset when I'm looking at opportunities. Like I feel like Mina, we literally, there's so like right now just with our team alone, it's like, oh my gosh, like this deal on this 12-plex just came across, and this is a really distressed seller. They just want out, like they're willing to off, like they just come to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not to say there's many of them that they're not good deals potentially for what you're trying to achieve, but it's a lot easier, I think, sometimes to find those good ones.
So you mentioned this one of your projects. What criteria do you use to quickly evaluate if this is a type of project you want to take on?
To quickly evaluate, essentially, if we can pay back all investors within the timeline of the project. So the few projects that we're working on right now, they're new construction. So we don't expect, we do expect that after we build the units, that we can pay back investors in that timeline of about 1 to 2 years. I think that would be one. And two, is the ROI for us and the investors reasonable enough? Those would be the two things. I think like internal rate of return within high teens or 20s for that type of project, because new construction tends to be a little riskier than long-term buy and hold. Those are like, there's just pre-qualifications, like in terms of quick rough math on what we look for in a deal.
Okay. So with this, so do you guys usually just sell off the builds once they're done, or do you hold on to them and then do return the capital and then do the infinite return concept?
And with regards to the projects we have in Ohio, we haven't gone through that full phase yet. So right now we're in design phase for both of them. So we have, I believe the one project we're just going to sell off and we won't hold on to it. And the other one is a 13 townhome development. And I believe what we intend to do is sell off a part of it and keep and then hold on to the other for long-term appreciation and payback.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So why now is it just Cleveland that you guys are both focusing on?
So like right now, honestly, it was for me, I had to focus, pick your lane, get your teams and build that, and then kind of expand. So Cleveland was a market that I started really looking in, then I ventured off and I came back to Cleveland. But Cleveland, for those of you who don't know where Cleveland is, it's like the southern shores of Lake Erie. It's kind of across from like Chatham. If you know Chatham's like past London. So you can kind of go through Buffalo or Detroit and come to Cleveland. But I think Cleveland's a really interesting city. It's a big city. It's the second largest city in Ohio after Columbus. It's like the 54th largest city, I think, in the States. And although it was primarily initially a big manufacturing, city, and then in the 50s, you saw the population decline and that whole shift happening. But it's really coming back with a much more mixed, diversified economy. So big healthcare bases. Many people have heard of the Cleveland Clinic. But there's other big healthcare providers in there. I'm trying to remember some of them. University hospitals, Metro Health and Medical Mutual. They're really big employers. There's big technology industries, insurance, obviously still manufacturing. I think in that northeastern Ohio area where Cleveland sits, there's like 9 Fortune 500 companies that are headquartered there. So there's a really solid kind of mixed economy, which is
Mhm.
kind of a nice draw for where you want to invest. So it's relatively resilient, pretty stable, kind of low price of entry on housing, good rental market, good ratio, I guess, from a price to rent ratio. So those are some of the reasons why we went in there. And it's a city where some areas are very much revitalized, like the downtown and some of the areas, and that they're kind of they're fully recovered per se. And then there's those areas that are in the middle of the recovery, and then there's some that maybe show early signs, and then there's some that you're not sure when that's going to happen, which I think you see a lot of that in many US cities, like very different than what we see in Canada, right? But what I like about it is it offers different areas of the city offer different opportunities for what type of investing you want to do. So if you're going to be doing new constructions or flips or short-term rentals, like you want to be in the recovered areas or the ones that are nearing recovery. But if you're in a long-term buy and hold, you could get in those ones that are in the initial phases of recovery and really have great opportunities for appreciation in some of those areas as well.
Mhm.
So there's wins and there's strategies that are, in the different areas. And so that's one of the reasons why I think we like chose Cleveland. I'm trying to think if you can think of some of the other reasons that drew you to Cleveland, Mina, because I know we both focused there and that's how we met, right? So
In my opinion, one of the reasons that I like Cleveland is because the numbers work based on the fundamentals, or the
yeah,
deals work based on the fundamentals. Um, Not to name any cities in Canada, but the investments there are all purely on appreciation, or in this case, speculation. And I've never felt comfortable investing in those markets.
yeah,
I want the investment to run itself like a business, based on NOI and cash flow, and expenses, things of that nature that justify a reasonable mitigated risk when I want to put my money in something like that. And Cleveland offers that. As Tina said, there's different investment for whatever you're looking for in Cleveland.
but like you said, it's the fundamentals, right? Like I don't
Mhm.
invest where I live. I'm a realtor and I don't invest in my region
Yeah.
because it is I mean, if you want to park your money and hope for appreciation, that works, and that might be someone's strategy.
Yeah.
So we've always invested in other markets where we could get cash flow where it made sense, right? So I mean, Cleveland is a cash flowing market, and
Yeah.
so when you cash flow, you can weather the storm.
Yeah.
Right? When you don't cash flow, it's really difficult if the more challenging times happen, right? So I think that's why I think you really help mitigate the risk. I think on a lot of the properties we're looking at in projects, you got multiple exit strategies, which is always
Mhm.
something I like when investing and looking at properties. Is that even on this development project, we're like, no, if this didn't work, we could do this and we could hold it, and it still works, right?
Mhm.
So that I think again makes you much more comfortable in sort of moving forward with some of those different deals. Um,
Yeah, that's a really good point, because as you're acquiring properties, you want to have multiple exit strategies. And when you run your numbers, you want to run them to see, okay, if our first strategy doesn't work, right, for whatever reason, if we go to our secondary strategy, will we still make money? Will we still cash flow? Will we still be able to exit,
yeah,
preserve our capital, and maybe have some additional return, right?
Right.
Because so one of the questions that I had is, like, during COVID, a lot of people who I know that have portfolios in the US couldn't visit them. They couldn't manage their team. Even though their team was excellent, they still couldn't manage it from afar because of COVID, because of the access to physically going down there and all that stuff. So how is it going to be different for you guys? So, like, let's say if we got hit with another COVID and the border was shut down.
Mhm.
so one thing I would say, one of the ways I met Mina, it's like such a cool circle. Like, this is why I love our communities. I had a property under contract in Willoughby, which is a nice little area outside of Cleveland. A really cool. It was a rooming house, but had an opportunity. Should have been a triplex. The city was tired of it. The seller was finally ready to sell, but massive amounts of deferred maintenance. I really was like, I can't get there in time. Like, I put an offer in, but I needed someone to see it so I could figure out if we were going to move forward. So I reached out to someone else in one of my communities, Kyle, and I asked him if he knew anyone, and he recommended somebody, and I connected with somebody called Brad, who's on our team. So Brad and I chatted, and he was awesome. He sent a couple of his guys, drove out. and walk the property and put me on, with my realtor and on, FaceTime or whatever. And we had some good chats about what what the rental cost would be, where we think the ARV would come in. Like the property would cash flow. It's just, I was worried about the ARV because I'm like, that's great if I have cash flow, but if I go to sell it and it's worth less than what I put into it, then there goes all my cash flow, right? And it was a really challenging ARV. So we ended up not going forward with that property, but through that, I met Brad and we'd had some really good conversations. And then in that circle, Brad then got connected with Mathieu, and then they connected, brought me in, then Mina. So it's like amazing when you just kind of build that kind of local team. And Brad is local, like he lives in Cleveland. And that is I feel like for us, a really amazing benefit to what we're doing, because we have boots on the ground local team member who literally can get out to those properties, have those face-to-face conversations, know some of the counselors. Like Matt's been really great in connecting with a lot of officials in Mina and stuff, because there's grants available, there's abatements available. But when you have someone locally that can have some of those conversations and go for those lunches, it does make a nice difference. Not to say you can't do this without them. Lots of people do. But I feel like for us, that's it's a really nice benefit to be having Brad on the team. And there's lots of, that's why I said build your team first. They may not be exactly in your team, but they be part of your extended team, right? Is to have those trusted people on the ground that if you can't get there, you know that you have somebody who can, right?
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. So, okay, I have one last question. And this one is, how can one decrease the currency exchange fluctuation risk between the Canadian dollar and the US?
Leave your money in the US?
Yeah.
We talked about this, extensively. Mina, you want to take that one?
Oh, it's kind of a curveball of a question.
Yeah.
Why?
I'll be honest. I'm considering, like, I have money sitting on the sideline right now for any opportunity that might come up, and I'm thinking, should I just convert it to the US dollar? It's just, again, in a savings account, and that would be a mitigation risk. I mean, if you're asking me that question point blank and within the realm of real estate, I would say invest in the US with real estate, because that would essentially spread your risk of currency fluctuation. You have properties in Canada, you have properties in the US, and if the dollar goes up or down on either side, then you're well diversified. But I'm still trying to figure that one myself, especially that if we have to put our money in any of these US deals, it's costing us a little premium right now as Canadians.
Yes.
I think part of it, I think, is if you're going to invest in the US, make sure you're mindful of that. So if you are putting money in and it's a year project and you have to get your money out at the end of the year and you're investing in US dollars, so you're getting US dollars back, like, just be mindful that that's a risk, right? If you see, because that money could be devalued based on where the Canadian dollar sits. And so I think it's just being mindful of that. I know for a lot of investors, their goal is just to keep their money in the US. So at that point, that's how you're mitigating the risk.
That's right.
Continuing to invest in the US, and then they keep it in their US accounts. Obviously, you're filing your taxes and all that. But then when you go down on vacation, you have US funds in your US accounts to use, right? But if your goal is to bring money back and you have timelines when you need to bring that money back, I think that has to be something that you take into consideration, because it is an extra potentially factor, right, as to what your return might actually be, right?
So a couple of the investment groups that I've been talking to that are raising funds for a project in the US, one of the things they're doing is saying, okay, as a Canadian, invest in the Canadian company, and then we as the syndicator will take that risk of converting it into US dollars. And when we pay you back, the return is estimated at this, and we'll pay you back in Canadian. So then they're proposing that they take on the exchange risk and that it doesn't go to us.
So that's great. If you can, I mean, that is, I think, maybe too, for a larger fund, depending on how it goes, they can absorb that risk, and maybe they're underwriting with something to allow for that potential fluctuation. Like I know, like another investor who I spoke to who had done a number of joint ventures, that they got it did not work out for them so well when they were borrowing Canadian funds, right? Because then they had to take the loss, like when they did the conversion, that then they had to take that loss, I guess, potentially, because they were paying back in Canadian funds. But then, I mean, obviously, so he now prefers to only take US funds for his projects, just to mitigate, just so you really know what you're doing. So I mean, but I think it's a conversation to have, because it's a real thing. And it depends on, again, if you are going to leave your money down there for an extended period of time, or you have the opportunity to leave it down there if the dollar's, too strong, compared to when you bought in, versus, right, versus if you know you need to take it out, you might consider how the deal is structured, or if you're investing in Canadian or US dollars, right? Probably would be.
Okay. All right, perfect. So those were, oh, sorry. So I did have another question. So when you guys are doing the flips, is that in the US, is that treated as active income and then you're taxed in America? And then also, if you're a Canadian investing down there, then you're double taxed?
So no, so if your structure is set up properly, which is the most important thing, is to get yourself a really good lawyer. There's a number of them that work in our community that can get referred to you. Make
Okay.
sure you set your structure up properly, or you will have double taxation implications.
Yeah.
I can't speak, and maybe Mina can, because I have not done a flip, and I would say, someone like Glenn Sutherland would be the king to tell you all those implications. Mind you, I think he keeps most of his money in the US, but you still have to file taxes in the US and Canada. But because of our tax treaty, you file in the US, your taxable income is a lot lower. There's a lot more opportunities to write things off, and deductions that are available to you. So when you have that taxable income, you pay your tax on it. That goes up. You go through your US accountant with that, or your Canada US accountant. It goes to your Canadian accountant, and then that's credited towards whatever you would owe on that income in Canada. And often people don't owe any more, or very little more on that income. So as far as the actual how they look at flips in the US, like, I'm not a tax expert and I haven't done a flip in the US. So I mean, I don't know if you know specifically, but you're not going to be double taxed as long as you have your structure done properly. So you would pay your taxes in the US based on your income in your corporation. And that would be active income, right? It's not passive. And then that would be fed through, and then that would be credited against your Canadian tax on that income. And again, because your taxable income is lower the way that they are in the US, you do have a lower tax burden usually, versus if you generated the same amount of income in Canada. But that is a good accounting question.
That's exactly it. I agree with everything Tina said. Just with regards to active or passive income, you do need a good lawyer and a good accountant who's familiar with taxation on both sides, not just on the Canadian side or just the US side. And you can mitigate a lot of those taxes through the right structure. I choose to hold my US entity through my Canadian corporation. That may not be the case for everyone. And my accountant suggested completely different than what everyone else is doing. And it just because of that small difference that I want to hold it with my Canadian corp. If I was holding it with, in my own individual name, it could be a completely different structure with how I hold things in the US, which again, it's to mitigate those double taxations. But I can't speak on behalf of active or passive and what the best structure is in the US right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I don't think that question, like that corporate structure recommendation, is different for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes the difficulty is not even knowing what to ask the accountant lawyer, right? So then, so then you go into a meeting and you think you want one thing, but then you're not really sure, and then they give you all this advice, and then you go ahead and do it, and then it turns out, well, that wasn't really what you wanted, or
I faced exactly that, because I went and asked everyone in my network, what, structure do you have in the US? And they all gave me, oh, I just have this and I have that. I'm like, okay. And I even my US lawyer, who's familiar a little bit with Canadian taxation, recommended a structure. And then I go to my Canadian accountant, who's very familiar with both sides. He says, no, I recommend you do this. And I had to, I was in a very awkward position, because, everyone's accountant says this, you're telling me this thing. And I had to keep probing, and it felt uncomfortable for me to question a professional accountant that what they're telling me is right or wrong. And all it came down to, I had to tell them, why is everyone doing this when you're telling me this? And my accountant said, we fundamentally disagree on our interpretation of CRAs, you know, how they view LLCs, I think at the time, or LPs. And it's just it's a fundamental opinion on what CRA might or might not do in the future. And also the reason that I wanted to hold mine in a Canadian corporation. So if I had gone with a different accountant, there is a little bit of a kind of a predictive nature in what CRA may or may not do in the future. And I chose to go with my accountant's advice in that I just want to avoid any future kind of backpedaling from CRA or anything of that sort. But it required some uncomfortable pushback and saying, why are you telling me something different that I know everyone else who's operating in the States is doing and they're perfectly fine with it? So because I didn't know what to ask my accountant in a kind of an explicit and clear way, why should I go this and not that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So push back.
It was, I know, Mina, literally, we were on a call and he had like a document with like, I don't know, like 7 different structures that had been recommended by different lawyers or accountants, right?
Yeah.
And so obviously there's some differing opinions, but it also depends on, again, like he's flowing through to a Canadian entity. Some people aren't. Some people are strictly private lending. So there are other factors that go into, you know, what kind of structure is necessary. Some lawyers like to add an extra layer more from a litigation asset protection versus taxation. So yeah, I would say I'm still not like 100% like think I've got it right either, but it's important, I think, to get a few different opinions and make sure that you have people that are well versed on both sides of the border in terms of structure and accounting.
Yeah, one of the things I always tell people is, you know, so one of the strategies that I have in place is that every couple of years I hire a different accountant or a different financial advisor, and they do a full review of my portfolio. And so this is in addition to whoever I already have as an accountant, but I hired this external person to just give me another set of eyes on what I'm doing, right? And then every single time I do this, it's a different company, right? Because I want to know what I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what else am I missing here, right? It's not that I don't trust the team that I have. I do. It's just that they only know what they know as well.
That's right.
Right. So like and then of course the pushback I get is, but Huong, you're spending like $3,000 to $5,000 every couple of years. I'm like, yeah, but that I make that back. Like, you know, it's not money lost, right?
Yeah.
And then through that process, I learn so much stuff that I recoup that $3,000 to $5,000 every couple of years.
Yeah. Right? And you might avoid a large tax bill at, you know, in 5 or 10 or 15 years down the road, just from having spent that every few years.
I was said, yeah, that would give me, I think that's like peace of mind.
Yeah.
Even if you don't recoup it, that's like a small price to pay if you're managing a large portfolio that can have significant tax implications if CRA interpreted things differently than your accountant. So, and that's really interesting. I might take a note of that, right? Because then it's easy to get maybe comfortable in how you're doing things, and then potentially that puts yourself at a risk position, maybe, right? Interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like in the US, they have the 1031, which we don't have up here. And I'm always like, how do I take advantage of that 1031? Like, if only I could take advantage of that 1031.
So I feel like I'm just in my infancy in looking at the US, and like as you get into it and looking at people too who are raising US funds, so that there's so many other opportunities for them to work with investors who are US based investors with how they do it's like there's so many layers. Like it's I feel like there's a lot of learning still to happen, but which is really exciting because I think I'm a Toronto person that loves to learn and look at opportunities, and so it's the land of opportunity for sure.
Okay. All right, God. So we are already like way past our 30-minute talk. Like we're already into an hour here. So okay, so I am going to stop this because otherwise
it was great to chat.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. See, but that's how I know when I'm in a room with other investors, right? Because we can just talk and talk and talk. And
we barely scratched the surface, really. So, and the hour's up.
The surface, right? Like there's so much, right? That was so high level. So yeah,
that's perfect. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna let you guys close off with your last tip, last comment for anybody who's watching and like still hesitant on getting in the US. Like, what else would you want to just leave with that person?
Mina, you want to go first?
I would honestly say everything that you're doing in Canada, you just have to do it in the States. It's no different. It's the exact same process. And you'll find that there are more avenues to pursue those opportunities, whether it's through lending or deal flow or anything of that sort. You know, I can't think of one step that you don't have to take in Canada, but you have to take in the US, other than the taxation thing, which you still have to talk to an accountant anyway, even if you're operating within, you know, Canadian borders. And just go talk to people who are doing it, because you know, if you do want to grow your portfolio, there's no reason not to. It mitigates risk against, you know, one economy versus another. The US is a, you know, is a powerhouse around the globe. And that just speaks for itself. Why not invest there? And that should be one of the criterias in any investment vehicle, that you want to put it in a strong economy. And Canada's a strong economy as well. So what's the difference between staying locally or going to the US?
Yeah, I echo that. I think I'm trying to think what I would say. Really, I think it's individual. Like, it's not for everybody, and it doesn't need to be everybody. You can be totally successful operating within Canadian borders. It's not to say
Yeah.
that you can't find tremendous. I mean, I know some people have found so much success in Canada, and I'm sure if I'd stayed here, you know, we would have found our own success. But for what we were aspiring to, for the people that we were gravitating to in terms of the speed, the deal flow, you know, the ability to be creative, the cost to just meeting like meeting some of the builders that we're meeting. I mean, it's just different conversations, like just the speed.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, what? Sorry, you can do it how quickly? It's just a very different process, and I love it. Like, it suits kind of what we're trying to do. But I would say, you know, just talk to people that are doing it and in different markets, and think about what your end game is. Like, we started looking in Florida because we love to go down to Florida, and because we can drive there, we can take the dogs, take the kids. So we're like, love to have a short-term rental here that we can rent out, you know, bring partners in, and then have a place to stay. And that's still kind of on the list, but you know, it's a much more challenging market to cash flow in. I mean, there are cash flowing markets in Florida, but not where we were wanting to be. And it's a very saturated short-term rental market. So, you know, in doing our due diligence, we're like, ooh, like, you know, if I'm bringing a partner in, that it better be a lifestyle goal for them too, because there's no cash flow here. Like, in fact, we're going to be, you know, carrying this property potentially for a number of years. But it doesn't mean it's not a good investment. It's just what your outcome is, right? So if you're looking for cash flow, that's one of the reasons why I think, you know, Mina and I ended up in Cleveland, which is the
That's right.
fundamentals of things that make sense in short, long-term construction, all that stuff. So I'd say I just love surrounding myself by people that are doing it, finding out the different strategies, being okay to take your time. I started this process a year and a half ago. And you know, and I'm just really now kind of, I think, honing in. I think some people maybe do it more quickly. I might sometimes have the shiny object syndrome a bit too much, but yeah, there's lots of great resources out there and individuals. Please feel free to reach out to Mina or I anytime. I think Juan can share our contact information.
I will put that all down.
Yeah, always happy. As you can see, we can talk about this for hours. I don't know if anyone even made it to the end, but give us a call anytime. Schedule a Zoom.
Yes. Okay. All right. That is perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I love having you guys come on. And, you know, I can tell that you guys wear your heart on your sleeve, right? Like you guys are so open about some of the comments. And I was like, oh, this is really good.
Well, it was
All
nice
right. Thank you so much, Juan.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. So thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So I'm going to tune off. Thank you, everybody, for watching. See you guys on the next Q&A.
Thank you.
You're welcome.